Welcome to the Internet History Podcast. I'm your host, Brian McCullough. I've decided that some of my favorite interviews are the ones that we've done with bloggers because, everyone's work is personal, but the work of bloggers is far more personal than most. Today we're going to talk to one of the most prominent bloggers of all time, Jason Kottke of Kottke.org fame. He was one of the early bloggers, one of the first bloggers to go pro, and one of the few solo bloggers still going. To me, this is a fascinating personal recounting of the last 20 years as a publisher on the World Wide Web. Please enjoy this conversation with Jason Kottke. Jason Kottke, thanks for coming on the Internet History Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Brian.
So, we were just saying off mic, this show ostensibly was supposed to be a time machine back to the 90s. So take me back to the 90s with Jason Kottke. What did you go to school for?
So I went to school at a small liberal arts college in Iowa. And, I showed up. I didn't know what I was going to major in and eventually fell into physics.
Did you got a degree in physics?
I got a degree in physics.
Wow. All right. So what are the physics jobs that one's supposed to get when they get out of college with a physics degree?
Well, that's a good question. So after college, I went to grad school. I was going to get a PhD in ceramic engineering. And the research that I was going to do was my advisor, he was working on making these little ceramic beads that you would irradiate and then you would, put in the body to, sort of attack cancer at a, sort of a very targeted level. And so that was the research that I was gonna be working on, but that didn't work out.
It sounds cool though.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. It was really interesting.
So how did you get into being a web designer? Was that sort of you backed into it, or did you have were you a geeky nerdy computer kid?
Yeah, I definitely was. And so my junior senior year in college, it was like late 1994, 95. So it would have been my senior year in college. We got internet access. This was like this was 94. So like not every, like high speed internet everywhere was not a thing. Mm-hmm. Even at colleges, like especially, small colleges in Iowa. And so we got internet access and we got access to the web, and I, downloaded, or I'm sure like Mosaic was installed, which was, one of the first like graphical web browsers. Right. Was installed in the system at school. And we had computers in the physics department. And so like I went on there, and the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And pretty much from that day forward, I was like, I need to figure out what this is and how to do this and everything about this.
What was it? The multimedia aspect of it? I mean, you kind of have a reputation for, being a good designer. Was that what wowed you? Like, wow, you could, what are the amazing things you could do with this?
I think, to be honest, it was a little bit of that, but it was also the hypertext aspect of it. Just you could link from one thing to the next, to the next, and to the next. And like, I would go to the lab and fire up the browser. And, at that time, like it's funny to say, but like you could kind of like browse around and get a view of, even at that time, like it was like 3 or 4 years after, the web had been around for a bit, and you could browse around for a while and get a sense of sort of the entire World Wide Web, and I would do that. I would browse around for like 3 hours at a time and look up and be like, whoa, what just happened? But it was just so, I just loved it. There was just so much there.
What was the first website you yourself, or even maybe forget site, page? Because I even remember this. The first thing, I had a university account, so I wouldn't have been able to give you the URL. It was ufl.edu. Some, and there was a page. So like, what was the first thing that you designed on the web or put up on the web?
I mean, I don't even think we had shell accounts at the time. We had access, but there was no shell accounts or anything like that. So the first web thing I designed was sort of a page of my favorite links and things like that I kept on a floppy disk, like a 3.5 inch floppy disk that I could, I had a computer in my dorm room. I think it was my roommate's. And so I could take it there. I could take it to the computer lab. I could take it to, the physics lab had computers. And so I had this like homepage that I would haul around with me, which is, kind of weird, but like I didn't have any other way to do it. So that's the way I did it.
And so did you ever publish that list?
I did not. It just lived on that floppy disk until, I don't remember when GeoCities became a thing, but I'm sure that I published something there at some point. And I also remember this site called, what the hell was it called? Trailer Trash or something?
Really? Or Tripod? Are you thinking of Tripod?
No, it wasn't Tripod. It was like Trailer Trash, and it was like I think it was called Trailer Trash. Maybe I'm misremembering, but it was the same sort of thing where you could publish a page, your home page. And so I'm sure I distinctly remember having a page there, and that was probably like one of the first things I had that was actually online.
How do you get from that to say Oscillate or something like that?
Yeah, so like I said, I graduated from college. I went to grad school, and about halfway through grad school, I noticed that I was spending, I would come home and I would do my homework, because I was taking like 3 or 4 classes, and I would come home and I would do my homework, and then from about 6:30, 7, 8 o'clock until like 2 in the morning, I would be on the web, like trying to figure out how to design web pages and how to design websites and all that sort of stuff. And I was looking at sites like Suck and like Michael Sippy's site called Stating the Obvious, and like Hotwired, and what was his name? David Siegel was this guy who was doing. He's the guy that came up with the single spacer GIF, like the invisible GIF that would let you do these sort of print-like layouts with tables in HTML. And so I was like, loved that stuff and was just trying to figure out how to do it. And eventually I was like, wait, I need to not do this, physics, ceramic engineering thing. I need to figure out how to get a job doing web design.
And so are you still in Iowa or are you in Minnesota? Where are you at this point?
Well, I'm in Missouri.
Missouri, wow. Okay.
Yeah, in Rolla, Missouri, which is actually where I think Jack Dorsey went to school as well. I don't think we were there at the same time, but close. Yeah, and so like I didn't know anybody, like, and so I was going to school, and I was, spending my evenings like basically like trying to figure the web out.
Did you get a job eventually as a web designer? I know you do. I know you do eventually, but like, so we're talking like the 95, 96 period, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So this would be fall of 95.
So actually, give me a little bit about that, because this is something that I remember specifically. Like, the web is becoming a thing. How do I make a living on the web? Well, at some point, everybody needs to put up a website. Every frigging company in the world or whatever. So like, that was the easiest job, is just, all right, I'll start designing websites for people. Is that sort of what happened to you?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I really didn't, like at the time, you don't really know what jobs are out there. I was vaguely aware, I think, that this was a job and you could do that. Because there were people working at Hotwired and there were people working at, these sort of San Francisco and New York
Hmm.
agencies doing, these big websites that I love to look at.
But you're in Missouri.
But I'm in Missouri. I'm in grad school. And so I decided, I was like, okay, I got to drop out of grad school, which I did after a semester. And I moved back in with my dad, who, and I didn't learn this till later. Like, he was very concerned about me because it's like, okay, you've gone to college, you've gotten this degree, you went to grad school, you're on this sort of promising career path, and then you just sort of drop out and you're going to do this other thing. But he was very like understanding at the time. Like he didn't really say anything to me. He was like, okay, like you seem to know what you're doing, so do your thing. And so I moved back in with him and basically spent like 8 to 10 hours a day figuring out how to, try and do this stuff. And I was basically building a portfolio site, like, and that sort of became Oscillate, which is this sort of episodic / experimental website that I had, that was, basically designed to showcase what I could do with HTML and with design so that someone would give me a job.
Right. You use that term episodic. So like you would what, change the layout and design of the page like monthly or something like that?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I mean, in the beginning, it was every few weeks because I had a lot of time and I had a lot to learn. Uh, but yeah, I would come up with a new episode, a new thing, like every 2 to 3 weeks, and the most of the design of the site would change like every 2 or 3 weeks. It was pretty intense.
Well, but when you say episode again, like, so what's the content of the
So
episode?
I mean, it was just different stuff. It was, a lot of them were sort of design experiments. Like I I redesigned, quote unquote, the Yahoo homepage. Um, and it was very much like, I don't know if you remember like Ray Gun magazine, like back in
Oh,
the day,
absolutely.
with
Yeah,
like
yeah.
David Carson sort of style design. Like like I really liked David Carson at the time. And so like it was the Yahoo homepage, but it looked like sort of a David Carson like magazine layout.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there was also, like I wrote some essays and, sort of designed them in a, very graphic heavy style. I mean, graphic heavy for the time. Uh, and, just played around with that sort of stuff.
To get me to Kottke.org,
Hmm.
you are Kottke. The Who are you reading? Like, who are some of the early, what we would now call bloggers? Who are the people that you're like, that maybe lead you in the direction of doing what Kottke.org would become?
I mean, I would say, to kind of go old school, like Suck was always an
Hmm.
influence, like
Hmm.
Carl Steadman, Joey Enough, um, and that sort of group of writers. That was kind of a seminal influence. And I also like Michael Sippy in his writing, on
Hmm.
stating the obvious.
Hmm.
Like like even I think even more than Suck, like what he was doing, just sort of in a like, oh, I'm into technology and this web thing is really interesting and cool. Like, and he would do a lot of writing about that stuff, and that was very influential as well. Um, I would say Leslie Harpold, who sadly is no longer with us, but she had a personal website, and she also ran she ran sort of an online magazine called Smug, I think. Um, let's see who else. Molly Steenson. She ran a site called Girl Wonder, and also, oh shoot, I can't remember the zine. Like that was the big thing back then, is these zines, like these web zines. And she ran a web zine, and I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, I mean, to give a little historical context on this, like there's this sort of amorphous period where, from day one, people understand you can create a personal web page and you can put your shit on it, right? Whatever that may be. And then you're right. There's this '90s culture of zines and producing your own DIY content in an offline sense, and so what we think of everything personal that's not on a major siloed platform today as a blog was something that kind of evolved over time, and it's not like everyone agreed, oh, now we're blogging. Like, not only did people have to evolve the sense of this is what we're doing, but like also the formal structure of it wasn't that. Like, your personal homepage could be anything before it became this reverse chronological, sort of diary or list of links and things like that.
Exactly. And I think that, what's interesting is that blogging didn't come from, blogging didn't originate from a small set of folks. It was like everyone was like throwing darts at the wall to see what would stick. And, there were online diaries, I mean, Justin Hall has been online doing this since, the mid 90s, 1993, 1994, I think is when he started. And, there were online diarists. He was more of a, online diarist, but using a lot of hypertext kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So more bloggy than a lot of people were. Mm-hmm. There were, all of these sort of design sites and design blogs. I mean, we would think of them as design blogs now, but there were these design sites like Caliber 10,000, K10K, which, I was also reading, and those sites like that were, they would give like, oh, this guy over here is doing this cool thing, or, these people are doing this cool thing. And that was really influential as well.
All right, we're beating around the bush. Kottke.org. I think you've said before that was just sort of like another side project growing out of Episodic, maybe. Like, what was the idea? Why did you register the domain, and what did you think it was going to be when you launched it?
Yeah, so Kottke.org started as an episode of Oscillate. It was sort of like, I don't know. I wanted to do something that was more regular and more like, I wanted to write, and I wanted to do it in this sort of diaristic kind of bloggy way. And I wanted to, I think half of it was probably that I just wanted to design a container for this type of content, to see how that, I don't know, just to see how I would do that, I guess. Mm-hmm.
Because again, for historical context, this is before the days of CMSs. You're coding it up yourself. Yeah.
Yep. It was all by hand. And I did it many years by hand. I'm not sure when I switched over, but it was it was after Blogger had, mm-hmm. been around for a while. Mm-hmm. And things like gray matter, and I think movable type. I didn't switch to movable type until it had been going for a while, I think.
Well, actually, we'll come back to that. I want to know your history of CMSs and platforms and things. But so Kottke.org is what is it? March of '98. You put it online. Again, and I kind of sometimes say to people, like, if do your best to put yourself in the mindset of when you launched it. What did you think you were doing, and did you intend it to be like this will be the site that takes over or something like that? What did you think?
No, that I don't think that was, that wasn't really in the cards. Although over time I kind of realized, I was like, yeah, this is the thing that this is the thing that I'm going to do, and not Oscillate. But I think initially it was just sort of like, I wanted something I could do more regularly, because I was working at the time. So it was '98. I had, I'd had I'd had a
Were
full-time
you?
job.
Yeah. Where were you working? Did you finally get a web designer job?
Yeah, after about 8 months, I got 8 months sort of, living at my dad's place in rural Wisconsin. I got a an internship in Minneapolis,
Hmm.
and that turned into, a full-time job pretty quickly. And I had that job for about 2 years. It was at this company called Imaginet, which they were a Mac reseller and service company, and but they were trying to transition. They, one of the partners had kind of saw the writing on the wall as far as the web was concerned, and so they were trying to transition to doing sort of more web stuff. And by the time I left there, it was full time web design.
So okay, back to Kottke.
Yep. Yeah, so like I was working there, and just having I didn't have I had less and less time to do oscillate the way that I had been doing it and the way that I wanted to do it. It took a lot of energy, and I think doing something like writing an online diary slash blog was less intensive, because all I had to do was worry about the writing, and I didn't have to worry about redesigning or designing something every 3 or 4 weeks or a month.
And the first post, like I on your 20th anniversary recollection post, you or maybe it was the 10th anniversary, but you talk about how, like, you're embarrassed to read them now, but you had to go through that to become who you are today, and for the site to become who it is today. But like, so what were some of the things that you were writing about, and stuff like that?
I think I'd blocked a lot of that out of my head.
You have the archives, dude.
I do, and people are welcome to read them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting to like look back at some of this stuff and see just, I don't know, just how very different I was then, and just like a different time in my life.
Because you're like what, 22, 23?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
probably a little bit older than that, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, in that ballpark, 23, 24, and yeah, I mean, some of the stuff is the same, like talking about music and TV and movies, which I still do. Um, it's kind of interesting how light it is on the links, especially in the early
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
A lot of it is just writing, like more of a diary, or more of like, hey, I noticed this thing today. Whereas now it's like, there aren't posts without links.
Yeah, how did, because again, remembering back from the time, there was almost like there were these different parties of like, well, I'm a diary blog, and this person is a, here's my hot take on this blog, and then like link blogs were thought of as like a different species or whatever. Like, do you have a sense of why Kottke.org sort of evolved in that direction?
Hmm. I don't know.
And it might not be like a linear thing, like, okay, you became a link blog or something, because as you talked about on Gruber's pod, like, you did a lot of writing at various times, like especially around 9/11 and things like that. But
Mhm.
that's kind of what you become known for, is like, this guy finds the cool shit on the web every
Right.
day for me. But that clearly, obviously, wasn't any sort of like something that you planned to evolve into or something like that.
No, no. But while I'm thinking about it right now, I think that what happened is that as weblogs became a thing, the thing that happened is that we all, everyone in, and there were multiple sort of weblog groupings and cliques and stuff, but the one that I sort of belonged to, we all linked to each other. Oh, Matt said this, or Meg said this, or Ev said this, and we all kind of linked to each other in this, sort of networky kind of way, and it became this, it became this way of this way of writing online. I think that was very comfortable and very natural. And after a while, I think it just became this way of like, I'm gonna I'm gonna point to something over there, bring it to my page, and talk about it a little bit. And that's, this sort of style developed, I think, from that.
So I have two different questions on this because this is my favorite thing to interrogate when I talk to early blog people. First would be, do you remember, like some early blog people, like, I remember this is the post that all of a sudden I got 1,000 readers and, it slowly built from there or something like that. Do you remember how the audience developed? Was there like, do you have this was the post sort of story like that?
Well, the audience developed. So I had a audience already from Oscillate, and I had I had a mailing list for Oscillate. It was, there was no software. It was just a list of people that I kept in my email program that I would email when I came up with a new episode. And so there were those two things that I had sort of carried over. And then once I started writing more frequently on Kottke.org, and the blog thing sort of took off, where it was like, oh, Matt Howie's on the cover of, this magazine, or, bloggers taking off doing this thing, and every time that happened, it was, there was a little, it was just sort of this steady uphill trajectory. But I would say, and I mentioned this on Gruber's show, the the 9/11 post was sort of uh, was a jump in my audience. It I can't recall exactly, but the I think the audience increased by like 50% over that week and never went back down.
Dave Weiner told me the same thing, of course, that and well, almost every blogger talks about that. Like, that was such a transformative moment for the medium. Not 9/11 only, but 9/11 into the Iraq War sort of thing. And okay, but the other thing that I'm interested in is the idea, and I've seen you talk and write about this in other places, but this idea that the first people to the party sort of become the aristocracy. Not the aristocracy, maybe that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Like, so like you are linking to Meg and Evan and Matt Howie and people like that, and they're all linking back to you, and so that then, like when when everyone shows up to become fans of REM, and the early fans are like, well, but like, since this idea that if you get there first to a medium or a new hot thing or anything, is that you're just inevitably going to become the superstars of whatever that new thing is. I'm I would be curious to know your thoughts, almost philosophically, about that, about building an audience on a new medium and how that sort of works.
I mean, there's definitely there's definitely an advantage, like sort of the first mover advantage, of being early to do anything. And I think that there's like back in the day, like you had to be somewhat techie and somewhat geeky in order to sort of make this work, in order to make it happen. There weren't sites hosting and CMSs and all that sort of stuff. And so you had to kind of know how to use Photoshop a little bit. You had to know how to do HTML, and you had to know how to navigate your way through a Unix shell account.
You had to know how to buy hosting time on a server somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And you also had to have access to a computer at some juncture. I was lucky enough that, like, my dad, he bought one of the first IBM compatible PCs on the market, and it was a fortune. And very lucky to be exposed to that. And so some of that is, there's a lot of privilege wrapped up in how you get to be one of the first movers online. You had to be in college at a certain time, and you had to have access to technology and all this sort of stuff. And, that's something that I didn't have any realization of at the time, because I'm 24, 25, 26 years old, and I am furiously trying to figure out how to, make my mark. And not only make my mark, but also like just there was this massive whole huge world of discovery online that I was like, I wanted to do all of it. I wanted to take in all of it. And like, how can I do that? And so I'm just furiously trying to figure it out and not really thinking about anything else.
Well, yeah. Also, is there like some sort of like psychological journey where these are the people that I screw around with online, and then oh wait a minute, there's tens of thousands of people potentially paying attention to us screwing around online, and that doesn't even get into when people take it pro and bloggers turn into getting jobs at real publications and things like that. What was that journey in terms of this is not just like some screw off thing over in the corner, this is like a thing?
So as a kid, like I grew up on a farm, and then when I was about 10, I moved to a small town, and there were about 2,500 people in that town. And at some point in like 2001, 2002, 2003, like there were more people reading Kottke.org every day, like multiples more, reading Kottke.org every day than lived in my small town. And when I stopped to think about it, it was insane. And it's still insane. Like it's still weird to me that there are all these people that read my website every day. And when you sort of add them up, the scale for like sort of a one to many sort of relationship is just it's just weird. And different people, I think, handle that in different ways. I think that I handled it fairly well in terms of not getting too big for my britches and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, like, I was a 25-year-old guy, and it was a really great feeling, to be honest.
Do you still feel really good about that? About that? I guess we're talking about fame, some level of fame. Do you still enjoy that?
Yeah, no, not, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, now I think it's been long enough, and and I think relatively in I hate the word fame. I hate talking about the that aspect of it.
I couldn't think of another word, but
yeah, no, I mean, it's the right word, but it's still, yeah, it's still weird to talk about. I can't remember what I was going to say about it. It's just, it's kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I like, what I like is I like when, like the only aspect of it I like, I think, is when people either through email or, every once in a while, like I'll get an email from someone, or someone will come up to me in real life and say, "Hey, are you Jason? Like, I really like your site," and I can like talk to them about it. And it's not the getting recognized in public or whatever, but like talking to people about the site and what they like about it, and like that's really, like, I really like that, and like who they are, and just like getting to know people on that basis is really, I really like it.
All right, let me bring us back to our narrative, as it were. At some point, you move out to California. Again, I believe getting a job as a web developer.
Yep.
Yep. So eventually you can make Kottke.org be your full-time job. I think it was around 2004-ish.
Yeah, 2005 actually.
2005. Wow, that long. Okay, interesting. Um, did you experiment with ads before you did the fundraiser?
Nope,
Not at all.
not at all.
Philosophical reasons, or
I don't know. I don't know why. It's funny.
now
I don't remember.
we should say, you know, because by 2003 you could have put AdSense. 2003, 2004, you could have put AdSense on, like everyone did at that
Right.
point, you know. So you couldn't have the excuse of, well, it was complicated. How are you going to get a DoubleClick account, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it was probably at least somewhat philosophical. Like, I don't like ads, so I'm not going to put ads on the site. Um, I really don't remember how I came up with the whole, micro patron thing. Asking, basically, I did a year long kind of, NPR slash PBS style, pledge drive where I was like, hey, kick in some money and I'll do this for a year.
And you raised enough that you were like, well, at least this'll this will pay the bills for a solid year. That's how successful that was.
Yep.
Wow, that's
I
great.
was able. Yep, I was able to pay the bills for a year. It was like, the web design job that I quit to do this. Like I made about a third of what my salary was.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But I had savings
mm-hmm,
and so it was doable. It was doable.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when do the ads come in? Is that many years later, like when the deck comes around, or?
Yeah, so I did the micro patron thing for a year and stopped after a year. I decided I wasn't gonna continue that experiment. Um, and I think that I stopped doing it without any sort of clear plan as to what I was going to do instead. And then the deck, I got an email I think from Jim Koodle, uh, saying, "Hey, we've got this advertising thing, and we've got a couple sites in the network. Like, do you want to join?" And I was like, "Okay, let's do that." And and I think that was maybe 3 or 4 months after I stopped doing the micro patron thing. So it went from there to the deck, and then I had the deck on the site for 10 years, more than 10 years.
um, how about like affiliate links? Has that ever been a big part of what you do?
Yeah, so and I remember the Amazon
Mm-hmm.
Associates program, and that's been a sizable chunk of my revenue for at least 10 years, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Um, all right, let's come back to the your history with CMS and platforms and things like that. So you stop coding it all yourself. What when you meet like Meg and Ev?
So I never moved over to Blogger.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I went straight from hand coding my site, which I did for an embarrassingly long time, I would say, to movable type. Um, and it's funny, like Blogger at the time. So Blogger, when it first launched, you had to give them your username and password for your site, so that you would author, you would write the files on blogger.com,
Yeah, I remember
and then it
that.
would
Yeah.
FTP the files and your archive files and stuff to your server, um, which is kind of amazing to think about.
Kind of
Like that's
insane.
that's how it was done.
Yeah.
Uh, but then you know there were software like Gray Matter. I don't know if you remember Gray Matter.
Yeah,
was
sure,
a
sure.
was blogging software,
Yeah.
and then Ben and Mina Trott came out
Uh-huh.
with movable type,
Yeah.
and you could install it on your server, and so it would manage the files right on your own server. And so it was, at some point, I can't even remember. It might have even been like 2002, 2003, where I finally switched over to that, and I've been on MT ever since, and that's still what powers the site.
All right, I need you to go back in time for me again for a process question. Um, when early on, when you're more evolved into the sort of link blog that you become, how do you find your stuff to link to?
Well, I read in the beginning, like I would just read other sites, and I would find links from other sites, other blogs, other blogs kind of like mine. Um,
You scroll through your RSS feed and see what's new and see what catches your fancy and you curate that list.
yeah, I mean, but even before RSS, like
Mm.
I had my blog roll, which is basically a list of the
Right, right,
sites
right.
that I like to read that was in the sidebar of my site. And I would look at other people's blog rolls and link out to those sites. It was much more of a throwback to surfing the web. You would go from link to site, which is not really the way that it works now. I
Mm.
don't I don't spend a lot of time doing that, and I don't think anybody else does either. Um, yeah, and then eventually it became RSS. Like I had my list of sites that I would read through my RSS reader. Um, I used what did I use? Newsfire. It was a RSS reader for the Mac that was super well designed. It was this guy. What was his name? David Watanabe, I think.
Mm.
I think he went to work for Apple eventually because his interface design was amazing. It was so good. Um, but I used that for a long time, and then I switched to Google Reader for a while, and then Reader went kaput, and then I switched to Feedly. And I still use Feedly every once in a while, but I use it less and less. Twitter's the main thing now.
Yeah. Do you keep like multiple different lists, or you just have whittled it down to like accounts that you know are your gold?
Yeah, I just whittled it down. Um, I
Do you,
think that
do you
you
depend
go.
a lot on reader pings and suggestions to you?
I do get those occasionally still. It used to be a
Yeah,
lot
that
more.
tiny sushi one I saw today.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, it used to be a lot more. Um, I would get probably 20 or 30 links a day in email, and now I probably get five. Um, and it's interesting. It used to be the links that I would get sent used to be more. They would be more kind of all over the place, and now I get stuff. I think people have gotten more of a sense of what I'm into, and so now I get stuff that I've oftentimes already seen, which is I don't know what that means, but
Well, because they know you so well that they're like, well, this is a thing for Jason. And
right.
because you are Jason, you did see it.
Right. I mean, I do spend all day like, you know, basically like reading and browsing online. So I do see a lot of stuff.
But is that okay? So this is the last process question, I guess. But like, do you have like a regimen to it? Are you like, all right, first I hit this, then I hit this. Okay, I've not found anything good, so I'm going to go over here. These are my emergencies. If I'm really struggling to find something, is it like that, or is it random?
I think it's a little bit of a hybrid. There's certain stuff that I know I can hit if I really need something. If it's like, oh, I have to do a podcast this afternoon and I had an appointment earlier. So it's like, oh shit, I really need some stuff. I have places that I can go where it's like, okay, this is going to be, I can find some stuff here that I can put up. Um, and there's also other stuff that's like, okay, need to, I need to write about this book that I read last month. And so, I know I can block out an hour or two to fully do that. Um, but mostly it's just sort of constant low level attention to, various sources and various feeds, whether it's reading Twitter or email newsletters or, hitting my feed reader.
All right, let's transition into the philosophical questions. um, so like you have a 2013, so you know many years ago now. You wrote a post about the blog is dead, long live the blog post.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even before we talk about that, like that sense in the mid to late aughts when all of the other bloggers, not all of the other bloggers, but some bloggers did transition or did turn their blogs into professional gigs or did take jobs at the Washington Post or things like that. Like in that The Blog is Dead, long live the blog. I think your quote is like, I'm the last guy dancing on the stage by myself and everyone else has moved on to movies and television. Like, did you feel like, oh, I'm doing the thing that I like and everyone was using this as a platform to something else? Like, how did you feel about that like blogging sort of was this thing, it gelled, and then it sort of like exploded into 1,000 different stars or pieces or something?
I mean, I mostly I felt like there was this community, and it became larger and larger over time. There was this community of people who were all sort of doing this kind of because they love to do it. And, you know, for better or for worse, we were all linking to each other and that sort of thing. And it was a lot of fun to be involved in that mix. And I think over time, as people peeled away, where, you know, they got busy in you know, whether it was like, oh, they started a company or they went to work for a startup or they were starting families or, you know, whatever happened. You know, I think more and more people peeled away, and there were less and less people who were interested in this sort of distributed online conversational filtering of information. And, you know, and I miss that, and I still miss it. And to some extent, like that, you know, it happens on Twitter a little bit, I would say. But, you know, as far as like my cohort is concerned, like it doesn't really happen. And I really miss that, you know. And in some ways, like I feel like, you know, it's not really the way I blog anymore. Which is a little, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's where the more link heavy stuff came from too.
Is what about the fact, what do you think, because of the link heavy stuff? I guess this is a question that the answer really is going to be, well, these things come in cycles. But like, everybody has a friggin' newsletter now, right? Or a podcast, I guess.
Right.
But you know, but specifically the newsletters where they're doing well, here's my tab dump. And that was a thing that went, email itself felt like it was a thing that went away for a while. Now that's back. And like, what do you think about that? Like the idea of the value of, hey, the rest of us are busy with our lives. Here's some great shit that you missed. Is that like just something that you feel like is evergreen?
I think so. I mean, people like sharing things with other people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of at the root of it. And people also want to be heard by people that they know and admire. And yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, that's at the base of it. And I think that if you look at why sites like Facebook are compelling, even though a lot of people would argue they are, you know, super bad for society, they're still super compelling because people just, you know, Facebook is such an easy way to share things with the people that you know and you love. You know, I think it is the easiest thing that has been invented so far. And that's, you know, why 2 billion people around the world use it.
Yeah, and I kind of asked Justin Hall a similar question when I talked to him, is like, how does that make you feel that something that you've been doing for 20 years, which is, here, I found this, I'm sharing it with you. 20 years ago, that was kind of an insane thing to do to a lot of people. Like, how do you feel about the fact that now basically all of society has been trained to do that almost as like a primitive evolutionary reflex almost?
I think it's great. I think, when we were talking earlier about sort of the privilege involved in publishing online, like that doesn't exist anymore to the same extent. And anybody, almost anybody, can publish their thoughts online for anyone else to read,
And
for good or bad.
I was going to say, because there's been such a backlash to that recently, and I felt it too. I believed in the web from day one because it was like, well, anyone can have a voice, and now a lot of people are like, well, was that so good? you know, but so you're saying you still feel fundamentally that that's positive, that everyone has access to being heard.
I think on the whole it is positive. I think what's problematic is, what Facebook and I don't just want to pick on Facebook because I think it's a problem. It's a problem with VC funded companies in general. Uh, what are they taking away from you that what do you have to give up in order to have access to those publishing tools and to this massive network of humanity? Um, because like back in the 90s and the early 2000s, we were just doing it for the hell of it, and it was just this thing that we were just all kind of doing, and we didn't have to give anyone anything to do it. Now it's sort of this bargain with the devil where you have to be advertised to and to give up this personal information that then Facebook can analyze and sell your attention. Um, so I still think it's good that people have access to these publishing tools, but I think the business models around these things are a little bit, it's problematic.
What about the business model of being a one man band website? Which I'll stipulating that you're not a one man band. You've had great people guest and help you out over the years, and
Yep.
has but other people have been going away. You and Gruber talked about this, both being representatives of this sort of like era of when you can be one person that has a website that can make a living. Is that something that you feel like you can sustain in this world?
I think so. The membership that I launched a year and a half ago, that went really well, and it's really given me I think a pretty stable base for my business, for the business aspect of the thing. So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
What's the demographic of a Kottke.org reader, either if you know it or in your mind? Like who do you imagine are the people that are showing up every day?
I've never measured any sort of demographics stuff. I imagine somewhere deep in the bowels of Google Analytics is some tab that will tell me how many people they think are male or female and what their ages are, but I've never looked at it. From the feedback that I get, I think that, people who read the site are a lot like me. They probably grew up mostly in the US, probably educated, somewhere between 30 and 50. Probably more than 50% male, I would say. Probably more like 60 or 70% male, just because it was I mean, I don't know why. I have some guesses as to why, but I'm not sure I want to go there right now.
Well, but so is there an imaginary reader in your mind that you're posting for, or do you not even do it that way? you're just, this is me, Jason, this is what I want to share?
It depends. I think everyone. I think every so often there's a person, like a specific person that I know that I sort of write to. And like I think what the writing style is it's very much like I'm writing an email to that person, and then I post it publicly. Like, hey, here's this cool thing you should check out. Here it is.
This is probably the same question, but is there a guiding, what's the word? Is there like a philosophy or thesis behind what you decide to post? Like, is there a through line behind what I see on your site and what I would likely never see on your site?
The site is pretty eclectic. I would say, if I see something and I'm like, that's interesting, it's most likely going to end up on the site. And I don't know if that's like helpful. It's never been helpful in explaining what the site is actually about to anybody.
But that is interesting because, okay, that's surface level thinking. That's like almost instinctual. That's like, cool, post, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's never evolved into, this is the dumbest thing I could think of, but what I'm doing is I'm bringing sunshine into people's lives and I'm making their day a little bit better. No, you're just like, this is cool, post.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, not to go back to the Facebook thing again, but like, the whole Facebook thing now is like, we're connecting the world or whatever. Like, that's not what Facebook was about in the beginning. Like that's like the highfalutin sort of explanation after the fact. Like, Facebook was like, holy shit, we've got people, and we can get more people using those people, and those people will tell those people, and they'll all be writing to each other, and it'll be great. And like, that's what Facebook was about, and that's still what Facebook is about. And like, I feel like the story that you invent after is like, to some extent, like bullshit.
How much that makes me think, how much of do you think your traffic comes from things like being viral, like a post going viral and being shared on social media and things like that?
Very little.
Really?
Very little.
So like, you're saying you believe the majority of your traffic is people, you're a destination, they come back to you again and again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the percentage of people who go to the front page of the site is kind of nuts compared to, I think, a lot of other things.
Yeah, see, that's interesting. That might be why it's sustainable, because that's the thing that various forces have pushed other sites away from. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it definitely hasn't done my traffic any favors, being that way. Like I was never able to build any sort of huge following on Facebook. I've got one on Twitter a little bit.
Well, but I mean, because you're like close with or were close with Jonah Peretti and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So like you've basically ignored sort of the model that he pioneered and built.
Right. Well, I mean, I think in order to have done that, you have to. What BuzzFeed and what Mashable and all those sites did is that they posted like 50 things a day, and that wasn't possible with just me. I just couldn't do that. That's the thing that they figured out at BuzzFeed and at Huffington Post is like, let's just post lots, and some of those things will stick and some of them will take off. And that's how we'll build our audience on Facebook. And that's, and that just wasn't going to happen with me.
One more thing referencing the Gruber podcast, I recommend people look that up because he will have, what did you do? Like almost 2.5 hours or something.
Yeah, it was like 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah,
it was absurd.
Way more Jason than I'm going to do. Not that Jason's not an excellent guest, because you definitely are. But you guys, again, both being these sort of like solo independent guys, were talking a little bit about how that community of indie bloggers that we're remembering fondly. It was either you or him that mentioned like maybe those people live today on YouTube or on Twitch or places like that. Like that spirit is probably still there, right? It's just on these other platforms or niches.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there are all sorts of people who are individuals, like making a living on YouTube, Snapchat, Twitch is, a good example. It's that same sort of thing. Like, I really like doing this. Oh, I'm good at this. Oh, wait, like YouTube can give me like a cut of ad revenue and okay, so I'm going to start making more shows. And then it's like, oh, I have a deal with YouTube now. And, it just kind of goes from there. And it's the same sort of trajectory. It's just people aren't doing it with blogs. They're doing it, being influencers on Instagram.
Well, and see, that's what I would find fascinating if I could figure out somebody that was early on Twitch. And if they would have that question that I asked about you being early to blogging and becoming the aristocracy, I wonder that's I don't know why, but that's what I always find fascinating is how those sorts of things shake out, and I wonder if it plays out the same. All right, let's end with a two-parter. The second part of which I think I know the answer to, but the first part would be: do you think you will be doing Kottke.org 20 years from now? And the second part is, do you want to be doing Kottke.org 20 years from now?
I don't, 20 years is a long time. I don't think I've ever been really convinced that I should go work for somebody else over the past, 10 or 15 years. So I would have a hard time seeing how that would happen. It'll be interesting to see if an independent, blog or site or whatever on the open web is still a thing in 10 or 15 or 20 years. I would hope so. I would hope the open web is still around and still works much in the same way. I think that would be the biggest obstacle.
Jason, I said this offline, gonna say it online. I said it to several people, Malik, Dave Weiner. I love doing this podcast because occasionally I get to meet heroes of mine. Thank you for coming on the show, talking about all this 20 years of Kottke.org. And thank you for finding me cool shit on the web for 20 years.
No problem. Thanks, Brian.
If this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, please subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice. There's plenty more great internet history where that came from. And if you're a longtime listener, then you know what to do to help us out. Rate and review us on iTunes. Because iTunes gives credit to reviews and ratings, and the more great reviews we get, the more people will discover us. As always, there's more info on our website, www.internethistorypodcast.com. The show's Twitter handle is @NetHistoryPod, and my personal Twitter is @BrianMCC. Thanks for listening.